Story 1. The Night Walker on the Farm Road. It was a quiet, moonlit night in the countryside. The moon hung low, casting long, ghostly shadows across the narrow, winding farm road. Michael, a young man who had recently moved into a small house nearby, often walked this road late at night after finishing his work. He liked the solitude, gave him space to think. Tonight, the stillness felt different, heavier somehow. As he walked, the familiar crunch of gravel echoed beneath his boots. The wind whispered softly through the trees, and the night air smelled of damp earth and pine. Everything seemed normal, until he heard it. Another set of footsteps, slow, deliberate, matching his pace. Michael froze for a moment, heart racing. At first, he thought maybe it was another late-night wanderer. But when he turned his head, the road was empty. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, darker, and a chill ran down his spine. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination. He quickened his pace. The footsteps behind him did the same. Faster now, closer. Panic surged through him, and he broke into a run. Gravel flew under his feet, and the cold wind cut across his face. His chest burned as he glanced over his shoulders. Still nothing. Then he reached the bend near the old abandoned barn. Heart pounding, he spun around to confront his pursuer. Nothing. The road was empty. The moonlight illuminated only the worn fence posts and the gnarled trees. He let out a shaky breath and froze. In the fresh gravel ahead, there were two sets of footprints running side by side. One was his, the other he didn't recognize. Michael didn't stop to wonder whose they were. He turned and sprinted all the way home, vowing never to walk that road after dark again. Some nights, locals say you can still hear the footsteps echoing along the old farm road, walking but never arriving. Story 2. The Stranger at the Bus Stop. It was just past midnight when Emma waited alone at the last bus stop on the quiet suburban street. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting uneven pools of light on the cracked pavement. The air was still, almost too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emma hugged her coat tighter around her, shivering not from the cold, but from the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. She had missed the last bus by just a few minutes, and now had to wait for the next one. The faint sound of distant traffic hummed softly, but otherwise the night was silent. Then she saw him, a figure standing at the far end of the bus stop, shrouded in shadow. He wasn't moving closer, but somehow she felt him watching. Her heart rate spiked, and she tried to ignore him, telling herself it was just another late-night traveler. Minutes passed. The figure didn't move. Every time she glanced toward him, he seemed closer, though he hadn't taken a single step. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Finally, Emma's bus headlights appeared in the distance. Relief flooded her, but the figure remained. As she climbed aboard, she thought she saw him raise his hand, not waving, not gesturing, just pointing directly at her. When she looked out the window seconds later, the bus stop was empty. Not a trace of him. No footprints, no shadow, nothing. Emma never waited alone at that bus stop again. And some nights, people passing by say they see a lone figure standing there, watching, waiting. Story 3. The Whispering Cabin in the Woods. Late one autumn evening, Daniel decided to take a shortcut through the dense woods near his hometown. The trees loomed tall, their bare branches scratching against the night sky. A cold mist clung to the ground, swirling around his feet with every step. As he walked deeper into the forest, he noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. Curious, he followed it, and soon came across an old, abandoned cabin. Its wooden walls were cracked and weathered, the roof sagging under years of neglect. Yet from one of the windows, a warm, inviting glow spilled out. Daniel hesitated, but his curiosity got the better of him. As he stepped closer, he heard it, Soft whispers, almost like someone was calling his name. Daniel. Daniel, his heart raced. He told himself it was the wind, maybe an animal. But the whispering continued, growing clearer, more insistent. He pushed the cabin door open. Inside, the air was thick, heavy, smelling of damp wood and something metallic. The glow came from a single candle on a rickety table, but there was no one there, only shadows flickering across the walls. Suddenly, the whispers multiplied, surrounding him, coming from all directions. Daniel spun around, trying to find the source, but the room was empty. His eyes fell on the wall behind the table. Etched into the wood were names, dozens of them, all scratched deep, as if warning anyone who dared enter. And at the bottom, freshly carved, was his own name. Daniel ran without looking back, the whispers chasing him all the way through the trees. He never went near that forest again. Some say, on quiet nights, you can still hear the faint whispering from that cabin, calling out names, waiting for the next curious soul to enter. Story 4. The Last Call from Room 209. It was a stormy evening when Ollie checked into the old roadside motel. The place looked abandoned, except for a tired-looking receptionist who barely spoke a word. Ollie just needed a place to rest for the night. He was given room 207. Around midnight, as thunder shook the building, Ollie's phone rang. The caller ID, room 209. The room next door. Confused, he answered. A shaky voice whispered, "Don't open your door, no matter what you hear." Ollie sat up, heart pounding. Who is this? But the line went dead. Moments later, a slow knock echoed through his room. 3 taps, soft, patient. He remembered the voice. He didn't move. Then came scraping nails dragging down the door from top to bottom. Ollie grabbed his phone and dialed the front desk. Ollie grabbed his phone and dialed the front desk. The receptionist sounded confused. "Sir, there is no room 209. That part of the building has been closed for years." Ollie froze. The knocking stopped. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. And when he checked out early next morning, he noticed something on the dusty door of the sealed-off room. Fresh fingerprints. 5 long streaks, dragging downward, as if someone or something had been standing there all night. Story 5. The Child on the Stairs. When Fatima moved into her new apartment, she loved everything about it, except the staircase. It was narrow, dim, and always felt colder than the rest of the building. On her second week there, she came home late from work. As she climbed the stairs, she heard giggling. A child's laughter, but her building didn't allow kids. She stopped halfway. Something moved in the shadows below her. Then she heard it again. Soft footsteps, tiny ones, climbing toward her. "Hello," she called out. A small figure appeared at the bottom step. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, wearing old-fashioned clothes. His hair hung over his face. Fatima stepped back. "Are you lost?" The boy slowly lifted his head. His eyes were pitch black. He whispered, "I live here, with the others." Fatima bolted up the stairs. She didn't look back until she reached her door, but the staircase was empty. The next morning, she told the neighbor across the hall what she saw. The woman shook her head and said quietly, "That boy died in this building 30 years ago, falling from those same stairs." Since that night, Fatima takes the elevator. Always. Story 6. The Face in the Window. Rohan lived alone in a small house at the edge of town. His backyard faced a forest, and his bedroom window overlooked it. One night, while scrolling on his phone, he felt someone watching him. He turned toward the window. Nothing but darkness. He shrugged it off and went to sleep. At 3:17 a.m., he woke up suddenly, heart racing. He didn't know why. Then he noticed something. A face pressed against his window, pale, expressionless. Eyes wide open, Rohan froze. The window was on the second floor. The face didn't blink, didn't move. It just stared. Rohan scrambled for his phone to call the police. When he looked back, the face was gone. Officers searched the area, but found nothing. The next evening, as Rohan prepared to sleep, he saw fingerprints on the outside of the glass. Long, smudged prints, as if someone had been hanging there. The forest behind his house suddenly didn't feel so empty anymore. Story 7. The Thing Under the Bed. For as long as she could remember, Ariba always slept with her feet tucked under the blanket. It was a childhood habit, one she thought she outgrew. Until last winter, she woke up one night to a strange sensation. Something was moving under her bed. Slow, dragging movements, like claws grazing wood. Ariba held her breath. The scratching grew louder. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the floor. The room was quiet, but then a low voice whispered from under the bed. "I've been waiting for you to look." Ariba jumped out of bed, sprinted to the hallway, and flicked on every light she could reach. When she returned with her brother minutes later, the room was normal. No scratches, no noise, but the underside of her bed was carved with faint letters. "Hello, Ariba," freshly scratched into the wood. She sleeps on a mattress, on the floor now, and she never lets her feet hang over the edge. Story 8. The Doll in the Attic. Extended version. Hassan had always ignored the old attic in his house. It was dusty, dark, and filled with cobwebs, place for forgotten memories and old junk. But one stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows and lightning streaked across the sky, something unusual caught his eye. A small porcelain doll, sitting upright, staring directly at the doorway, as if it had been waiting for him. He didn't remember ever seeing it before. Its cracked porcelain face and lifeless glass eyes sent a shiver down his spine. Curiosity, or perhaps foolishness, got the better of him. He climbed the creaking stairs to the attic, each step groaning under his weight. The doll's eyes seemed to follow him, tracking every move he made. Hassan reached out and picked it up. The moment his fingers touched the cold porcelain, a strange chill ran down his arms. It was almost like the doll was alive. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang. He jumped, dropping the doll. It landed face up, grinning, the expression somehow more sinister than before. A cold, raspy whisper echoed from the darkness. "Finally, you came to play." Hassan spun around, but the room was empty. The air was thick and heavy, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Heart-pounding, he tried to open the door locked. Not physically, but some invisible force seemed to hold it shut. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the lights flickered. When they came back on, the doll was gone. But on the floor, scratched into the wood, were two words. "Next time, you stay." Hassan ran down the stairs, never looking back. From that night on, he avoided the attic entirely, never daring to step foot near it. But sometimes, during storms, he could swear he heard tiny, deliberate footsteps moving above him, and a soft, porcelain giggle echoing through the house. Story 9. The Man in the Wallpaper. Sarah had just moved into her new apartment. The walls were covered with old faded wallpaper flowers and vines curling across the surface. One night, as she was brushing her teeth, she noticed something strange. A shadowy figure seemed to shift inside the wallpaper, moving behind the floral patterns. She blinked. Nothing, just the old wallpaper. But then, the figure was closer. A pale face pressed against the wall, staring at her with hollow, empty eyes. Her heart pounded. She backed away, but the face kept appearing in different corners, always watching. She grabbed her phone and shined the flashlight on the wall. Nothing, just flowers. Then, a voice hissed from the paper itself. "You can't leave. I see you, always." Sarah ran to the door, but when she looked back, the figure had pressed its hand through the wallpaper, and now it had her fingerprints in its place. From that night on, she never touched that wall again. But sometimes, at night, she could swear the wallpaper was moving, breathing, watching her sleep. Story 10. The Last Photograph. In her grandmother's old house, Enam was cleaning the attic when she found a small, locked drawer tucked behind stacks of old books. It had no key. Curious, she forced it open. Inside, a single photograph. It was her sitting at her desk that very morning. But she didn't own a camera. Nobody had been in the house. A cold gust of wind brushed her neck. The drawer slammed shut by itself. Heart racing, she flipped the photo over, in shaky, dark handwriting. It read, "You can't hide. I'm closer than you think." Suddenly, the photograph changed. Her smile had turned into a grim, twisted version of herself. Eyes hollow and staring straight into hers. A whisper echoed behind her. "Next time, I won't wait for you to find me." When she spun around, the attic was empty. But from that night on, every photograph in the house showed her smiling face, except the eyes were always watching, always following.